Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Time Out with Derek and Joe. For Joe Azzalina, I am Derek Gano. Thank you for taking time out of your day to spend some time with us. And once again, we bring back Mike Azzalina to talk a little NFL draft. Thank you, Mike, for joining us once again.
No, thank you guys. It's been a while. I'm excited to be
It
back on
has.
football season's in full swing. We'll turn the tables a little bit and talk about football.
So, that without further ado, we will jump right into it. And no place better to start, I guess, than with our number one pick, who was not really a secret, but it was going to be the for the Urban Meyer led Jacksonville Jaguars. Now Trevor Lawrence is coming on from Clemson, quarterback, 6'6", 213. Mike, we'll start with you. What did we think about the Jacksonville Jaguars draft, where obviously Trevor Lawrence was the number one pick, so people aren't really saying that was any decision to be made there, but also bringing in ETN. What do we feel about their draft and how Lawrence fits in probably as the day one starter?
Yeah, I mean, they had a no brainer at one. But honestly, as the draft went on, and I'm sitting and I'm watching and I'm seeing the players that they're pulling up off their board, their draft ends up being a really strong B plus and potentially an A minus, depending on some of these dudes who, how they turn out. Obviously, it all hinges on whether or not Trevor Lawrence translates, if he and Urban Meyer can create a culture of success down there in Jacksonville. But I loved what they did aside from him. Of course, bringing Travis Etienne, who's in my opinion the best back in the draft. I think when you consider all around, I know a lot of people love Najee, but to me, Travis Etienne is the guy. But just to throw another name out there that I loved personally, and they kind of redid their defense a little bit through this draft. I was head over heels for Andre Cisco from Syracuse, and praying that he got to the fourth round for the Eagles. He certainly did not. The talent will win the day in that regard. He went in the third round to Jacksonville, and I got to be honest, I think they might have had a really quietly strong draft. I think people said, "Oh, Trevor Lawrence," but after that, guys, it was for real. Like they had a really nice draft. I only named one guy, but I could go on about all of them. I'm just going to leave it there. But they had a really nice draft through and through.
And Joe, they had James Robinson there last year, who was a very good pick in himself as a rookie, but bringing in ETN again and also bringing in Marvin Jones from the Lions this offseason. They got a pretty solid offense there right now.
Yeah, I don't I don't think Jacksonville is going to have very hard time moving the football. We were talking to me and Derek a few minutes ago, just saying that Trevor Lawrence probably will be the starting quarterback come the first game. I mean, he's the number one pick. He'd have to be really hurt if he, God forbid, would be the only reason I would think that he would be out. Yeah, ETN, we saw him a lot in the last couple of years. He's just a really good back. Like he's gonna make people miss. He can finish. He's very strong. He's gonna be, I think, just as good as anybody coming out the last couple of years. I don't know if he would. We'll see what he does in his career, but he's gonna have a really good start to his career, and it's gonna have to help him, I think. And don't forget this: he's with his quarterback. They're gonna work off of each other. These guys know each other, so the familiarity there is gonna help both these players. But Lawrence, the confidence he has, ETN, the talent he has, it's gonna be fun to watch Jacksonville. If I was an Urban Meyer fan, I would say I'd watch him and root for him. I don't think I will. But that aside, they definitely did a good job in a slam dunk with Lawrence at the top of the draft board there.
Now, after the first pick, guys, is where it really started to get. I mean, you knew who the Jets were going to take, but it wasn't a slam dunk as to who the correct guy was to take. I will say, for those that aren't following Time Out with Derek and Joe on Twitter, feel free to follow us out there on Twitter. We put up a poll before the draft saying, with Trevor Lawrence as the unanimous number one pick, who do you believe is the second best QB in this NFL draft? Mike, the numbers shocked me, I will say. 56% said Justin Fields was number two. 22 for Trey Lance, and then Mac Jones and Zach Wilson each had 11%. Zach Wilson ended up being the second pick to the Jets from BYU. But do you think that was the right pick? Who do you think is the second best quarterback in this draft?
Justin Fields, guys. And I don't think it's much of a conversation. I know that there are probably Jet fans. I know plenty personally who were kind of up in the air about who to take. Overall, I think Joe Douglas and his staff had a tremendous draft. But at the end of the day, when I look at what's the teams that Zach Wilson has played over the course of the last year, I mean, Boise State's probably the best team they've played. Like, I'm looking at their schedule right now. They lost to Coastal Carolina by 5 on the road in that random game that just popped up out of nowhere because of COVID. But I mean, look, I watched Zach Wilson's pro day, and it was impressive, but it's a pro day. He's about to see a whole different beast when it comes to NFL defenses than what he saw playing Louisiana Tech or Texas State or Western Kentucky or North Alabama. So for me, it's Justin Fields. I think the Bears had one of the better drafts, and I think Ryan Pace going up and getting Justin Fields could pay dividends and actually keep his job. So for me, it's Justin Fields. Joseph, I don't know if you agree or not. We've talked about this a few times.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny just to look at Zach Wilson, and I do hope the guy has a great career, but he is really young looking. Like, just to see him on draft night, I was like, he looks like he's 16 years old. He kind of reminded me of like Doogie Howser, actually. I thought about that the other day. So
compared to the guys he was taking pictures with, he looked a little on the young side.
Looks a little young.
He looked terrified too. At one point, a couple of the guys flashed some signs that could have been construed as something other than, just a hello. And you look terrified.
He might have been a little starstruck. Well, anyway, Justin Fields is the better. He definitely had the better college career. He played against tougher competition, as Mike, you alluded to, with Wilson playing against really no one. Wilson did put up good numbers, and we said we liked him as a whole, but I just looked at something I looked up, a top 100 college prospect list. It's really funny. Justin Fields ranked number 3. Zach Wilson only ranked number 5. So they're not even that close, they're close even in that aspect. These quarterbacks will keep drawing parallels to each other as they go forward. It's going to be really interesting to see, the Jets, the Bears, both aren't really, sorry, Mike, my friend Mike, they're both like winning programs, and shout out to Eric, Mike's good friend, but they're both not really winning programs. And those two would tell you right off the bat, they're not. But yeah, Fields is definitely more talented. His legs are going to help him. And the Chicago Bears did a good job trading up to get him. I think that was such a smart move on their part, and it was fun to watch that night.
Yeah, I think the Jets and the Bears both actually had really strong drafts.
Yes.
Like when I think about the drafts overall, both organizations really had tremendous drafts. I absolutely loved Joe Douglas going up to get Elijah Vera-Tucker. The offensive line, they just set up their offensive line, the left side of that offensive line for the next decade with him and Mekhi Becton. And then they grabbed Elijah Moore in the second round and came back and got Michael Carter from North Carolina, who's one of the better backs in the draft too. So they weren't done there. They were able to beef up their defense. They got 3 guys for their secondary. Like, they really had a nice draft, and the Bears did the same, Derek. I was impressed with both teams. I think I gave them both an A when I was going through and grading. And obviously we won't know for 3 years if it's really an A, but when you look at value, like, they both did a really nice job in this draft, both organizations.
Yeah, and well, my dad being a Jets fan, I gotta throw a little love there. Was Zach Wilson the right pick? Yeah, I didn't think that he was number two, but I think he might be one of the safer options, and maybe that's what they were going for. You mentioned Vera Tucker is probably going to be playing guard, good pass blocker, but Elijah Moore and yeah, Carter as a part of that Lightning and Thunder there, who I forget the team that they ran. I think it was Miami that they ran for like 500 yards in this past season between the two of them. So he should be pretty interesting to watch. Between the three safeties they got, they probably hope that one of them can fill in for Adams, who was sent to Seattle past off season. So yeah, I like where the I still don't think that they're going to really come close to the division, but they're building something there in New York, and it's going to be another few years before they get there. But there were some couple good pieces there. The one we didn't talk about, Joe, Trey Lance out of North Dakota State. And he was not the only person, I don't know off the top of my head here, I can go looking, but not the only person drafted from North Dakota State, but he was their leader for the past few years. And hey, he must be talented enough that people saw the number three. And then where did the Niners? I think they jumped up from. I don't know the pick exactly, but they jumped up to grab him at 3. So thoughts on Trey Lance there going to San Francisco, Joe?
I'll be honest. I never watched them play in college. Maybe because they're never on TV. At least you heard about Carson Wentz when he was there, and you knew who he was. But Trey Lance starting to really hit the scene at the end of this year, I'd say, maybe mid-season. He's a really good quarterback. And the San Francisco 49ers have Jimmy Garoppolo. So unless they're going to trade him, Trey Lance is probably, at this point, I'd say is behind Garoppolo, but he still can learn from him while he's there if he's there not long enough. He looks like he can run. He looks like he has good wheels, and he's going to have a strong enough arm. He comes in with a good surrounding cast, though. George Kittle stays healthy. Bourne the receiver. I know they have plenty of options. I can't think of right now. They have a lot of good receivers. Is he going to be the savior to that franchise? Probably not. But he's a good quarterback, and I would say that was a pretty good pick. But again, number 3, it's just unbelievable to see a kid like this to go number 3. Mike, what did you feel going into the draft? Did you have him a lock at 3, or did you think it just depended on what the Niners were going to do?
Well, it was interesting to me because I kept hearing the Mac Jones stuff all week leading into about going to the Niners. And all I could think about was they basically already have Mac Jones playing quarterback for them. It doesn't make sense. Like, Mac Jones is incredibly accurate. He's built for a West Coast offense. And that's Jimmy Garoppolo. He's accurate. But here's the thing about those two guys that's not going to get it done. Neither one can push the ball down the football field. Like, neither one will throw the ball down the field. And as we saw a couple years ago, this team is only a year removed from a Super Bowl appearance. So, like, it's pretty much the same team, aside of maybe a couple of pieces on the defensive side of the ball. But, like, they needed a quarterback in that game that could push the ball down the field and make the big play. Garoppolo's not that guy. Mac Jones is not that guy. So as I sat there the night of the draft, I was like, Trey Lance would make sense because that's what he does. He drives the ball down the field. He's got a cannon for a right arm. I mean, that dude can rifle a football. And Joseph, they have some pieces in place. Like, Raheem Mostert is a really good number 1 back. They have Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk. You mentioned George Kittle. They've got a really good offensive line, and they have pieces in place on the defensive side, including Nick Bosa. Like, he's one of the best defensive players in football. He was just hurt last year. They were beat up on the defensive side. If they're healthy, and Jimmy Garoppolo is the guy they go with, they'll be competitive in the West. The West is not anything super impressive. There's a bunch of teams that beat each other up out there, and none of them really got better in the draft. But when I think about what they'll be capable of if Trey Lance takes a year or two to develop into an NFL quarterback with the arm that he has, I do think he's going to be a really solid football player and a really good quarterback with the tool set. It's just going to depend on whether or not they develop him the right way. And I think they have the coaching staff to do it. So
I'm very interested to see how he fits into Kyle Shanahan's offense there. Because you think about since 2017, 49ers quarterbacks have 83 turnovers under Kyle Shanahan.
That's a lot.
Jimmy Garoppolo, CJ Beathard, and names
The
like
list goes
that are
on,
thrown
yeah.
out there. Lance is someone, as you mentioned, got the rocket arm, got good size. He's going to give that offense something it hasn't had, and that's another someone who can move in the pocket.
Yeah.
They're probably still going to be a run first team. I don't think any of us will really deny that. That's the way they've gone for a long time. And with and especially someone like Trey Sermon, who was drafted as well. Another good
He's
piece that they're
fast.
going to put in there from Ohio State. Unfortunately, someone who dropped out of the national championship game very early. It would have been a shame to see what he did, but as well as Aaron Banks, a good guard from Notre Dame. They got in the second round.
Real mauler in the run
Yeah,
game.
so and that kind of backs up. That's their offense. That's what they're going to do. You're probably going to see Lance run the ball quite a bit. So
who does he remind you of? I was going to ask that. Is he like? I watched Colin Kaepernick in college, and I thought he went to Nevada, a small school. He kind of looked like him, I thought, a little bit, but is that not a great comparison?
Go ahead. Sorry,
yeah,
Derek.
Yeah. For some reason, I thought of Donovan McNabb, someone who can move around in the pocket decently. I can't quite remember how strong McNabb's arm was. But someone who can move around, good arm, accurate arm, not going to turn the ball over.
I think if he hits his ceiling, he's probably a Josh Allen is fair comparison. His size, his arm strength, the accuracy is questionable, which was what Josh Allen's big question mark coming out of the draft out of Wyoming was. So I think if you're looking for a real comp, I mean McNabb's probably fair in the sense of the size. I don't know if Lance moves as well as McNabb, because Allen certainly doesn't move as well as McNabb did. But I think he moves well enough, especially if you can get him out. He's strong, so a lot of QB power stuff. So that would be mine. I feel like that's probably the closest you're going to get to a current guy. Would be Josh Allen.
So, and the only one we didn't talk about here, we might as well talk about the last quarterback. Of course, was Mac Jones from Alabama, championship winner at Alabama, dropped all the way, as everyone was saying, dropped perfectly into the laps of the New England Patriots, a quintessential quarterback who not a lot of movement. He doesn't move around, but he has good pocket presence, and he can place the ball where it needs to be placed, which is good for Josh McDaniel's scheme. Mike, how do we see him fitting in? Do we see him starting off the season, or maybe do we wait until Cam Newton potentially loses the job? I guess Jason Stidham, who knows what's going on, or is it Nate Stidham? I'm not too sure. What happens with him? How do we think Mac Jones fits in New England?
So, here's I kind of mentioned before my thoughts on him. He's more of an accuracy guy, and let's be real. Let's be real here. If I have the chance to throw Jalen Waddle, and I have the chance to throw Devontae Smith, and I can hand the ball off to Najee Harris, I'm going to look really good. We've seen that with Alabama quarterbacks in the past. When you have that sort of athleticism and the offensive line that's standing around you, you're gonna be in good shape. He's got pretty average arm strength. The reason his deep ball was so good is, one, the separation his receivers got. Two, he is incredibly accurate. So while the arm strength is not there, he does put the ball on his receivers pretty well. When there are open throws, trust me, he's going to make them. We saw that against Notre Dame. We saw that throughout the season with him. One of the things that I think is most important for him is he's going to need a play caller, which he'll have. I mean, you mentioned it, Derek. Like he's going to have one of the best. He's going to have great coaching in that regard. Will he have protection? Usually the Patriots have a pretty solid offensive line. That's what Brady built his kind of career around. And the last piece is he going to have playmakers? And guys, I don't know if a Belichick offense has that type of a thing. Usually he depends on the offense to get the job done. And I think Jones needs playmakers to make it happen. So for me, he's not going to crack the starting line. It's going to be Cam. He'll get there. I just don't think he's going to be, I don't think he's the next big thing in New England. Joseph, I don't know how you feel.
Well, when I saw it happen, I was like, oh, here we go. Pocket quarterback, not very mobile. Michael said it very, very well said about he's had so much talent. It's just unbelievable how much talent this kid's had. He's going to come back to earth a little bit, I believe. I still wouldn't say that he's he's not starting day one. We know that, but I would not be surprised if they can get him those guys. Maybe you get a free agent this coming year for him. Maybe next year you go get somebody in the draft next year. He's going to need weapons because he's Ryan Izzo and, I'm trying to think even one of the receivers. I'm so bad with that. Derek, who's a couple
Nelson
guys.
Aguilar is there now. But I mean, he's a whiz. Edelman retired.
Right. He'll go to Tampa Bay next.
Kendrick Bourne, Jacoby Myers. They have Johnny who's pretty good, but
yeah. But they didn't even take a receiver in the draft, right? If I'm not mistaken, did they? Not high, at least. So you got to think that like Belichick even knows we're going to hurt a little bit, but who knows? Maybe this kid will end up winning a Super Bowl for them. I mean, we'll see. The jury's out, but Mac Jones isn't somebody that I bet my house on.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting. Every other quarterback, you seem to the rest of their picks kind of revolved around helping them, but Patriots really seemed to go defense, which was interesting. I don't know how the Patriots are. I know I liked them the beginning of last year, Joe.
You did, Derek.
I picked them over the Bills. I'm not so sure this year. I don't know where that's going, but
I will say, guys, that like as Belichick always does, the rest of and again, Mac Jones will be what he is. We'll see. He's a wait and see type of pick. But getting Christian Barmore at 42 or wherever they got him, and Ronnie Perkins, the edge from the end from Oklahoma, and then probably one of my favorite players in the draft, Cameron McGrone, the linebacker from Michigan. Probably one of my favorite day 3 picks by far. Those 3 picks right there, like you mentioned it, Derek, he's definitely trying to build a defense. And I think that's probably the best way to help a guy like Mac Jones in the future is to have a dominant defense that, can keep you in games. And all Mac Jones needs to do is make a play or two here and there. And that's it. And you can win championships like that. I mean, just ask Eli Manning.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, that's a great point.
Real quick, guys, when or if this year or maybe next year do we think that Mac Jones officially takes over?
This year. Yeah. I think it's probably later in the season, but Cam Newton, poor guy can't stay healthy. As tremendous of an athlete as he is, he's not healthy. And I don't think they're going to go to Stidham. Jared Stidham's just not it. I mean, they could and just try and save Mac Jones, but I mean, you picked the kid in the top 15. So, let him out there.
Rounding out the quarterbacks here, Kyle Trask was drafted in the 2nd round from Florida, went to Tampa Bay. Kellen Mond from Texas A&M went to the Vikings in the 3rd round. Right after that was Davis Mills from Stanford, who went to the Houston Texans. Ian Book, who was from Notre Dame, was drafted in the 4th round by the New Orleans Saints. And then Sam Ehlinger from Texas dropped to the 6th round. He was taken by Indianapolis. Guys, 8 quarterbacks through the top 3 rounds. is the most ever in the common draft era since 1967.
Mhm.
We'll move on to the pass catchers here now, which is kind of where things went after the quarterbacks. We'll throw out a couple of names here. You guys choose who you want to talk about. Number 4 pick was tight end Kyle Pitts, went to Florida, or from Florida, went to the Atlanta Falcons. Jamar Chase, top receiver from LSU who sat out during the COVID season, was drafted 5th by the Bengals. Jalen Waddle from Alabama was drafted over the Heisman winner at number 6 to the Miami Dolphins. And we might as well throw in Devonta Smith, dropped his way down to number 10, and the Eagles moved up over in a nice little trade with the New York Giants. Devonta Smith, Heisman winner from Alabama, was drafted 10th to the Eagles. Joe, we'll start with you. You want to talk about any of those guys in particular?
Well, I don't want to forget about the tight end / wide receiver out of the University of Florida, who, if I looked at Atlanta, I thought, all right, maybe they get a quarterback because of Matt Ryan and being in the top 4, it made sense. But they got Matt Ryan another weapon, and Kyle Pitts is a heck of a player. And a lot of comparisons I've heard was to like a Tony Gonzalez or even a Travis Kelce I heard on the draft night.
Mm-hmm.
That is some big shoes to fill. But if this kid is the real deal, the Atlanta Falcons might have gotten a steal at 4. I feel like he's really, really talented. We'll see what he does. Listen, Jamar Chase is the man. I mean, he was great in LSU a couple years ago. Him and Burrow reunite. That's kind of a theme of the draft. We'll get into that in a little bit. Yeah, he sat out okay, but he's still really talented, and he's going to help the Bengals offense. It's going to take pressure off of guys that are veterans probably to get him in there and to have him run the routes and, catch touchdown passes. So I look for Jamar Chase to have a big season, and I don't want to spoil our preseason anything, but he's going to be on my list, I feel like, for something there, Jamar Chase. And, Jalen Waddle's a great player, but like I even questioned it. I know how good he is. I didn't ever think he'd go number 6, but the Miami Dolphins paired Tua with Waddle. It makes a lot of sense. And, I thought that was really interesting. Those 3 guys, I just thought they could be game changers, each of them.
Yeah, I think for me, I was super confused by all 3 picks. I knew the Atlanta pick was coming, but as always with Atlanta, I never know what they're doing. One of my least favorite drafts in the entire year. The Jamar Chase thing, I get the let's reunite our quarterback with his guy, but I also want to go to the side of like, you did nothing to shore up the offensive line that got your guy hurt. Like the best lineman in the draft is sitting there and you passed on him. Same could be said for the Dolphins in that regard, although their line is in a little bit better shape than the Bengals. So I kind of got the Waddle pick a little bit more, but I still think they could have done something to shore up their line too. In terms of Devonta Smith, guys, like this is not just a dude who's fast. The Eagles might have come out with what truly could end up being the best weapon in the draft. He runs every route with precision. He's a tremendous wide receiver leader. I've heard nothing but high praise for his character, not just in the locker room, but on the field. Listen real closely to a podcast called Inside the Birds. My second favorite podcast to this one, of course. And, when I was listening to it the other day, one of the guys on there, Jeff Mosher, he said, I was talking to a scout from another team. He did mention the team, and I'm drawing a blank. And he said, this kid is basically Marvin Harrison in the way he runs routes. And guys, I'm going to tell you, if the Eagles just drafted Marvin Harrison, that's a dude whose head is in Canton right now. So, it's been a long time since the Eagles have had a number 1 wide receiver. That last time was T.O. It was for a year. But this is a true playmaker. And, this is a guy who went for 13 catches, 260 yards and 3 touchdowns in the first half of the national title game. So, To me, I think he was the one that made the most. The Eagles and he made the most sense of the teams who drafted receiver that early. That's just, and again, might come off as bias, but I think you'd hear that pretty much anywhere from anybody when you think about those teams.
Um, I'll start with Pitts. Um, yeah, man, I don't know. I'm
Get
not
it?
sure what they're doing. They must be going for a push here, which is interesting to see from a 4-12 team last year. Um, Julio's there, Calvin Ridley, now Pitts. They didn't draft a running back. They don't have a running back. Todd Gurley is gone and probably no longer in football for all we know. They have Mike Davis, who was a decent guy who filled in for McCaffrey in Carolina, but okay. But running back is one of the most important positions on the field and
Right now, it's Mike
offensively.
Davis.
So,
They're running.
and they completely ignored it. I don't understand. I didn't understand. Um, I didn't really like the Waddle pick either because I mean, aren't they all the same player? Will Fuller, Devontae Parker, Jalen Waddle. They're all speed guys. I mean, maybe one of them can they could turn into the possession receiver, but they all seem to be the same guy. I thought they needed more of a big guy, which unfortunately probably would have uh, been Chase, who well, he's not really much bigger, but and yeah, we talked about, I think even when Mike was on the first time, about the crappy receivers that the Eagles had last year and how brutal that was. I'm sure Eagles fans were ecstatic when, and I guess it's even more of a little jab when you jump over a team probably who was going to take the Devonta Smith in the Giants, who you see drafted down, ended up taking a receiver as well. Probably someone they grabbed a little too early, but
Sure.
yeah. So yeah, I thought that should be a very good pick, and yeah, it can't hurt that as Joe has mentioned, another QB wide receiver tandem that is coming together again in Philadelphia. So that should be very interesting. Uh, Offensive players were taken with each of the first 7 picks of the draft, which again is the longest it took to pick a defender since the beginning of the common draft era in 1967. Couple of cornerbacks off the board, guys. We had J.C. Horn was the first one from South Carolina, went to Carolina Panthers. Patrick Surtain II from Alabama went 9th to Denver Broncos. You see Micah Parsons in there, who was a middle linebacker from Penn State, drafted by the Cowboys. Any of them or any of the other guys that really stood out as that's a pretty darn good pick to be the first of the couple defensive guys off the board there, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, J.C. Horn was a guy, and I know he went to Carolina, but he's a guy that you heard a lot tied to Philly. But again, I don't think they did anything wrong with getting Devontae Smith, the Heisman Trophy winner. J.C. Horn's really athletic. Coming from South Carolina, he played against some big teams, SEC guy. But for as good as he is, watch out, because Patrick Surtain might be one of the best players to ever put on a Denver Broncos uniform. He is legit. When you have college quarterbacks telling you that they're not throwing to that side of the field, like, he is legit. I know I just made a bold statement, but Patrick Surtain will be on my fantasy football team. One of them.
Are you picking defensive players?
I guess I'm just going Denver anyway. I'm going crazy here tonight. No, so those two guys stand out. I know Farley's another name that's been mentioned a lot. Caleb Farley from Virginia Tech, and I got to see him play a little bit this year. He's one of those guys that I think, again, you don't really want to throw to these guys if you don't have to. So, but those three kind of hit my radar, if you will, and it'll be interesting because all three of them will probably make impacts right away, I would think.
Yeah, I listen, I think Surtain's really good. I've talked a lot about, wanting those two types of guys, or those two guys for the Eagles. When I saw Horn come off the board that high, I knew Surtain wasn't getting there and it was going to be a receiver. They were going to trade back. Horn for me, he's big. He can cover the X. In today's game, the X isn't always a big receiver anymore, but he's big. He's physical. He can play off man. He's physical at the point of coverage. He's not a very physical tackler, which you need to be in the NFL from the cornerback position. So that's a little bit of a hesitancy, but I feel like that can grow. For Surtain, there's just gosh, I don't know that I've seen a dude with that much discipline at the college level. He doesn't bite. He's not intimidated on routes. He knows he can catch up because of his discipline. He's definitely going to be a short side of the field type of corner. Ton of length. Has enough speed to make up on plays that he does bite on. He is a press man guy, so he'll fit pretty well in Denver with what Fangio does. But I look, I think you can't go wrong either way there. Caleb Farley is a good player. The injuries are the piece that's gonna be what they have to watch with him. There wasn't a whole lot that jumped out defensively though, Derek. You asked about other guys but like this wasn't a great edge group. This wasn't a great defensive tackle group. Like there wasn't a whole lot there at those positions. So to me, these were the top two in the class defensively, and they went where they should have. This was the great job by the Panthers and the Broncos. Great job by both of them.
I will mention Micah Parsons, who, as a Penn State fan, I was very disappointed he decided not to play in this past COVID season, but he stuffs it in the run. His coverage is, he's a middle linebacker, so he doesn't have to be that great at coverage. But filling in for Sean Lee, another Penn State linebacker who just retired, so he's jumping in to go along with, Van Der Esch and Jalen Smith, who's there as well. Joe knows I picked the Cowboys last year, so I don't know. That blew up in my face, but through no fault of my own, though, because Prescott went down. But so we'll see where I end up taking them. Their 28th scoring defense was not very good last year, but another guy to look out for, the top offense or top outside linebacker taken, Zaven Collins, huge guy from Tulsa, 6'5", 259, a ton of size, length. Strong, can shoot the gaps quickly. Someone who should be a very good outside linebacker piece for the Cardinals opposite. I believe Marcus Golden is out there as well now, former Giant. So we'll jump to 24 here, where Alabama running back Najee Harris was taken, and he is going to a team that severely struggled in the run last season. James Conner could not get going. James Conner is now gone. Najee Harris goes to Pittsburgh, where I would assume, Mike, they're going to try to reestablish that run and become the team that smacks you in the mouth again.
Yeah. If you like first round running backs, then you'll be happy with this draft pick. Me personally, if you have a luxury first round pick like the Jaguars, sure. Like go ahead, do you. You just got your quarterback. But like guys, the Steelers desperately needed offensive line, and I don't know that they did enough to get what they needed there. I mean, not that there was a ton on the board when they picked at that position, but when I think about their true needs, like they had other opportunities after that, and they didn't really get the guys they could have that they needed to shore up that offensive line. So, to me, Yeah, Najee Harris is tremendous. I said that at the beginning. I think he and ATN could have been 1-1, 1A, 1B, however you want to look at him. I like ATN better personally, but yeah, sure. You got your running back. I just don't know that there was enough done in terms of the line to make that much of a difference in the run game. Do you know what I mean? Like Najee Harris was really good because their offensive line in Alabama was basically just a brick wall. So I'm not quite sure he's going to make a world of difference, especially with what Ben was like last year.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
just kind of where I say I didn't love their draft overall.
yeah, that's a great point, actually. I mean, it all starts with the offensive line, right? They got to get the push. It doesn't matter what running back you have. If they don't get a push and create those yards per carry, they're not gonna. It doesn't matter who you have. So that is a great. And then they went with Fryermuth in the second round. I understand. Yeah, Ben loves his tight ends. People remember Heath Miller back in the day. But yeah, I get that's a good point, especially with Pouncey. I know retired. That's when people thought, well, maybe Ben is going to follow him, but Ben is coming back. So,
Guys, I'm
what?
sure they also took a long snapper. Like, who drafts a long snapper?
Why
And
do
a
you guys
punter.
think?
They have a punter
Well,
too.
Oh, it was
why
a
do you,
punter. It wasn't a
No,
why,
long.
it is a punter. Yeah, yeah.
Yes,
why
it
do
was a
you
punter.
if they
Sorry.
needed the linemen so bad, why do you think they didn't trade up for the linemen?
I don't know. I mean, they took two linemen. They took two linemen, one in the third, one in the fourth. But usually, like your day three linemen, especially if you're taking a tackle on day three, that like those aren't really starting caliber players. Your tackles on day three. You might be able to get an interior offensive lineman on day three and plug and play just because they're not as sexy of a pick. But they did take a day two interior guy, Kendrick Green from Illinois. But there were still some really, really good interior offensive linemen, like Quinn Miners, who's one of my favorite linemen in the draft. He was still sitting there at that point. Ben Cleveland was still sitting there at that point. Robert Hainsey was still sitting there at that point. So they must have seen something in Kendrick Green to pick him there. But I don't know. There were other centers on the board that like Quinn Miners probably outside of Landon Dickerson, probably the best center in the draft. So I don't know. I really don't know what the Steelers were doing. I'm not sure.
Well, and as we round out the rest of the first round there, guys, is there anyone else that you wanted to that you really stood out as a really good spot for his team or potentially someone who could make a huge impact? Or were most of those guys talked about, do we think? Mike, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I got one guy that I loved. I mean, we touched on a lot of them. There are some that I'm looking at that I'm like, no, don't like it, don't like it. But one guy that I really loved, and I think, I think the Browns had a tremendous draft. Is Gregory Newsome. Like I love that pick.
Yeah.
I was hoping that if the Eagles did have to move down, that's who they would get. But that that's a really good, that Northwestern defense was really good last year. And a lot of that was the cornerback play and Gregory Newsome. That I'll tell you what, the Browns had one hell of a weekend. Like they really did. And it started with him and it just kept rolling from there. He to me, it might be the best pick after 14 or 15 as I look at the board again. Like maybe you could argue Caleb Farley, depending on the health as it goes. But I love the Greg Newsome pick. So that's the guy for me.
I'm going to go one further than that, and I'm going to go Rashad Bateman, wide receiver out of the University of Minnesota. And the reason I say it is, yes, I liked him in Minnesota, but he goes with Lamar Jackson and a pretty good receiving core with Miles Boykin and Willie Snead and the tight end and Andrews. I look for Bateman to have a big year. I'm going to keep my eye on him. He's my T. Higgins of this year.
I loved the Northwestern pick, and I loved the first Northwestern pick, Rashawn Slater, tackle from Northwestern. They got the franchise guy with Justin Herbert. And now you cover his backside is what they did with getting Rashawn Slater. And that was a great pick for not sexy, but it's a good pick for the Chargers. And well, this wasn't a good one I loved, but I got to talk about my Packers, of course.
Yes,
Eric Stokes, yeah, I thought
there he is.
they took probably could have taken him the end of the second round, but he was a very good cornerback who 45.9 passer rating against him, um, and a 46% completion percentage. But I mean, man, I
Georgia
thought
guy.
that was I mean, he's very fast, amazing speed that they mentioned on TV that day. But man, they needed a receiver, guys. Man, and especially with Elijah Moore sitting there and just kept
I'm
dropping and dropping
just
and
gonna say
dropping.
that to you,
It
man. I was gonna.
drove me nuts. Taking, I mean, I realize yes, they need a cornerback because for those that didn't watch the NFC Championship game, if Kevin King doesn't get blown by at the very last play of
Scotty
the
Miller.
first half by Scotty Miller, then they potentially go to the Super Bowl. But
Oh my God.
This is where the draft is so difficult. Like, and it's got to be hard to be in that room because I've watched it with my Eagles for years. Like, it's 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 easy to build a board and then to look at that board and say, "Gosh, we are so short at corner," but then reach for the corner who's 8, 9 players down on your board when there's still guys at the top of the board who are there and available that might not be a position of need, but go by your board. Just go by your board.
Yeah.
You can build through your board. And for the first time in a long time this weekend, Howie Roseman did that. And I
Yeah.
walked away this weekend so happy. They didn't get the cornerback, and that was a position of need. But there were many times where if they took it, it felt like a reach to me, and I was happy with where they went instead because they stuck to their board. Like they just stuck to their board. And it felt very Andy Reid to for once to see your board.
Yeah.
So I get what you're saying, Derek. Like you have a need, but I'm of the mindset in the draft of like you take your best player that's on your board and you worry about filling your needs in other ways. There are more than one way to skin a cat. And I don't know that Eric Stokes is a first round pick is going to be able to step in and stop Scotty Miller from running by him in the NFC title game this year. Like,
mhm.
you know what I mean? So, yeah, it's that's what makes the draft so difficult. And I'm glad I'm not in those positions because I know I would want to reach for guys based on need because I'd have fans yelling at me if I didn't.
I was just gonna say it's easy for us to sit here in front of our laptops and say, "Well, they should have done this, should have done this."
Right.
I guess it's one thing. Like I'm sure they had Eric Stokes high up on their draft board, but when does it come? When do we think it comes into play? Like for instance, we look at I think these are Mel Kiper's rankings. He is ranked the number 10 cornerback by Mel Kiper, overall number 71, and they take him at 29. At what point do we think are you playing the chance game or you're also playing the other teams here? Like what do the other teams think about this guy if they have to be similarly thinking to what someone like Mel Kiper or Tom McShay are thinking in that, okay, well, this guy is number 10. We love him. But for those that are involved in like fantasy drafts, you might love a guy, but you look and say, well, can I wait another round for my pick to come around again to potentially grab that guy? But then you risk someone else might like him. I guess that's really the what are your thoughts there, Joe? You really give a take there. It's a tough decision sometimes.
Yeah. Well, the prioritizing of a player, I think, probably has to be the most gives the general managers and owners the most headaches, right? Because when you look at what you need, it might not be there. But then the opposite, it maybe is there, but do you really take it at that point? So I think it's just a real get. You're right. The whole like, give and take and what you can do at that spot in the draft and what other people are doing. Because you can't sit there. You might be able to do 10 mock drafts and those players all might be gone by the time you pick. So like, you just don't know. And it also depends on how good you are on your feet about adjusting. But I will agree with Mike. As much as I bashed Howie Roseman the last couple of weeks, I'll give him credit. He got it right this time. There's no way in my mind that I can tell anybody, in all honesty, that the Eagles screwed this draft up. Because the other thing is not just getting Devontae Smith, getting the offensive lineman from Alabama. That was a big pick. You're not getting boys, you're getting men from Alabama. So just remember that, Philadelphia. Howie Roseman did you right this time.
So, guys, that'll bring us to, and you feel free to dive into guys in the second and third round if you wish, who were taken. But let's start with some of the teams, and maybe if you have any specific players who are winners of this draft, you really see these picks benefiting a specific player or a team. Mike, let's start with you. Do you have a couple of winners of this draft?
Yeah, I wrote down a few, and I'll just quickly run through because I talked about a few of them already. I told you I love the Jags draft. I think probably one of the best drafts Matt Rule's draft, man, like in Carolina, like what a job he and his staff did in this draft, guys. Like, JC Horn, it was basically, if you would have told me that the Eagles were going to have this draft before the draft happened, I would have celebrated. JC Horn, Terrace Marshall from LSU is great value in the second round. Brady Christensen, the offensive tackle from BYU, that's a tremendous pick. Tommy Tremble, we know, is a great blocking tight end whose hands are phenomenal. They just didn't feature him. And I love the Chuba Hubbard pick from Oklahoma State. They also, guys, like Shi Smith is going to be a really good slot receiver in the NFL, like really, really good slot receiver in the NFL. And Deontay Brown is just a house. Like, he's basically the entire left side of an offensive line. He doesn't just play guard, he plays tackle at the same time. The guy's enormous. So, I loved what they did in Carolina. They basically just took Sam Darnold and surrounded him with as much talent as they possibly could on the offensive side, protection on the offensive side. I did love the Minnesota draft. I thought they did a nice job. There are some things that I think, I liked the Kellen Mond pick. I think that with Kirk Cousins deal the way it looks and they can get out of it next year pretty safely, that Kellen Mond could be an easy step in. I like the Wyatt Davis pick and the Christian Darrisaw pick. They really shored up their offensive line, which they had to do. And defensively, they got a bit better too. I love the Browns, but I'll leave them. I do want to quickly talk about the Eagles because, yes, I'm a fan, but I feel like for me, watching what they walked away with this weekend, they really walked away with a talented group of players. Yes, Devontae Smith, we know that. Joseph mentioned Landon Dickerson. Guys, that's a top 25 player that they got at 37. Like, his injury stuff is why he's not – why he wasn't the first offensive lineman off the board. He's a phenomenal offensive lineman. And they basically just eliminated a need next year when Kelsey retires. He just slides right in. So that's something they don't have to worry about next year. The pick that the two picks that I think are going to go under the radar a little bit are Zach McPherson, the corner from Texas Tech. He transferred from Penn State after he graduated in 3 years with his first degree. The kid, they really feel like they got a steal here with him. He's big, he's physical, he's a playmaker, he tackles really well, and you've got a defensive coordinator who prides himself not just on being a defensive coordinator, but he was a former defensive backs coach and a former scout. And they really feel like they got something there. But potentially the biggest steal is the Gainwell kid from Memphis. Look up his stats from 2 years ago. He opted out this year. But look up his numbers from 2 years ago. He had 600 yards receiving 2 years ago, and he runs hard. They've been looking for a complement. They've been looking for a guy that they can play in the slot from the running back position who creates matchup nightmares. This dude is him. I don't know that we'll see it right away. He hasn't played in a year, but I think maybe by week 8 or 9, we're starting to see him more in the offense. They didn't miss a pick here. Like there's not a zero. There are 0 bad picks in this group. They did what Big Red used to do. I'm going to build in the trenches. I'm going to take defensive linemen. I'm going to take offensive linemen. Like they really hit it. They hit it well this year, and I'm excited about this draft. Marvin Williams, the Kit Tuyapa from USC. Like guys, how he did it. Like he did it. This is an A draft. He finally did it. And I'm excited to see what this class looks like in 3 years because I think it's going to be his best.
Well, my winners, I have the Jets just because I think they had to get Wilson. If they would have got Lance, we would have questioned it. So I'd say, or they would have got Mac Jones, that would have been funnier. Elijah Moore, though, is going to be a good receiver. So I wanted to give them credit for that too. So good job to the Jets for that. The Eagles, of course, I don't want to go into that again. The Bears, though, I said it before, getting a talent like Justin Fields is going to make Chicago that much better years from now. He's really, really talented. And I also put down too that Tevin Jenkins, the O tackle from Oklahoma State, is a guy that's going to help them too and protect Fields when Fields comes on the field. The other teams I have are Tennessee with the addition of Farley and Molden, both in your defensive backfield. That's interesting. They got 2 cornerbacks. That's hard to do sometimes to get one. They got 2. And Farley's legit. The other team I have is the Miami Dolphins because I think Waddle's going to help them a lot. And I'm biased, but Liam Eichenberg is a really good offensive lineman. So I like that pick. And Jalen Phillips, the DM for Miami, is somebody to watch out for because he's disruptive and he's gonna be able to hit guys. And then the other team I have, and the last one for my winner is the Bengals. Well, Joe Burrow and Chase are reunited. I love it. I told you before, I love Jamar Chase. He's also a hard worker. I heard in an interview, he talked about how much he wants to be on the field again. So that will be interesting to see what comes of that. And also, what about Jackson Carman, the Clemson tackle? You go to Clemson, you played for Lawrence. Now you're going to play for another big time quarterback. Good job, Cincinnati. So they're my 6, 3 AFC, 3 NFC.
Well, I'll start with, I agree. I think as much as it pains me to say it, I think it's the Bears. I think the Bears were a winner. Not since what? The years of Jim McMahon. Can you say that? Well, I guess it all depends on what happens with Aaron Rodgers here. But
true.
And you've heard it all over the place. He may be the best quarterback in that division before he even steps on the field if Aaron Rodgers is gone. And not since the years of Jim McMahon in the 80s will that have been true because they've gone through the years of Jay Cutler, who, I mean, he was never a top 10 quarterback. So, and Mitch Trubisky, unfortunately, didn't work out. But and then you mentioned as well the Tevin Jenkins, the guard who was taken or tackle wherever he's going to play. Gonna defend that front side, probably right tackle is what they're saying, but good run blocker. And the other team I went with, I only picked 2, but the other team I went with was the Baltimore Ravens. I think bringing in Rashad Bateman, it would be a great pick for a receiver at Minnesota. I think he's going to give someone who has some hands other than Marquise Brown. And I mean, Andrews is good in the middle there, but you'd like a speedier guy there. And I really like that Bateman pick. I really like Owe from Penn State, outside linebacker, freak athleticism out there. He's going to be very good coming off the edge. And Ben Cleveland as well, they were saying, is a very good sneaky guard, offensive guard who can give him some run blocking, bulldozer of a blocker, they call him. So And I will say, of course, I will say a individual player, Jalen Hurts was probably
Oh,
someone who completely
benefited.
benefited from this draft. We mentioned all the names, but let's jump over then, guys, because there aren't all going to be, no one can all be winners, right? Let's jump over to some losers. Joe, do you want to start us off with some of the losers of this draft?
All right, the first one's kind of funny, but the more I thought about it, it made sense in my head. So I hope to everybody else out there it makes sense. I put the Dallas Cowboys because they traded it, so the Eagles got Devontae Smith. So I said that one. And then I know they took somebody probably decent, but they gave the Eagles Devontae Smith. It's kind of like the CD Lamb thing last year. I don't know. So I went with that one. I did Washington because Jamin Davis is, I guess, okay from Kentucky, the linebacker. And Samuel Cosme, the lineman from Texas, they didn't scream to me great player. So I gave Washington a loser. And the Cardinals, maybe Zaven Collins works out. I know he's a good player, but I didn't know. I just think the Cardinals, Rondell Moore, the wide receiver, he's got to really work out because Colin Murray needs more help with Hopkins. Or not Hopkins, sorry. Hopkins is fine. Fitzgerald's probably going to retire anytime soon. So I'd say if Moore works out, then maybe I'm wrong on that, but I give the Cardinals a loser. The losers are tougher for me, I'll be honest. The other one I said was the Raiders. What are they doing? Like, come on. Give Derek Carr weapons or do something to help the kid. Instead, they went tackle. And I know the kid's from Alabama. I said to my buddy at work, he's a big Raiders fan. He goes, Joe, what are they doing? I'm like, you know what? I don't know. I can't defend it. And Trevon Morig, the safety from TCU. Sure, but you got two. Now you got a defensive player along with your lineman. The other loser, my last one, Michael's going to laugh at this. The Colts, because you just brought Carson Wentz on board. And you know what? You didn't help them. You got defense. And their already defense is so good. So they're my losers.
I mean, it's really interesting. We basically have the same loser. I'll start with Dallas because you mentioned them, and it's not because of the Devontae Smith trade. Like I get why. Like I understand you get more value. But guys, they took a ton of dudes with character risks. They took a bunch of reaches. Like I said before, they knew they needed defense, and they went and reached all over their board. But think about these character risks. We know about Micah Parsons and what he's been accused of with the hazing stuff at Penn State that was never cleared up. They took Kelvin Joseph, the corner from Kentucky. There were two coaching staffs that basically kicked this kid off the team. He didn't finish at LSU. He didn't finish at Kentucky. He got kicked off of two teams.
That's hard to do.
And then they took the offensive tackle from Florida State, Ball, and that dude has 11 counts of domestic violence against him and didn't have a reason or an excuse for any of them. They did take that Nashawn Wright, who I felt like was a huge reach. I saw a bunch of places where he was ranked as like the 185th player, 190th player, and they basically took him at like 80. So I don't know exactly what that was about. So Dallas was a big time loser to me. I put the Colts down as well. I think someone needs to go check on Carson Wentz to make sure he's not crying somewhere that they took a quarterback with one of their picks. Because I just want to make sure he's okay. We know how emotional he can be in that regard. But for me, guys, like you take two defensive ends right away, one who's not going to contribute, and you're supposed to be a win now organization. I'm not sure exactly what the Colts were doing this weekend. It just felt like there were, Kwity Paye, maybe I can see that they did need pass rush. But Odiengbo, like that's a dude who might not play. He tore his Achilles. Granson was a reach. So I didn't love that. And then, you mentioned the Raiders. Yeah. Leatherwood was a weird pick at 17. Morig could have been the pick at 17. And then you take Leatherwood at the other pick. Like, I'm not quite sure what happened there. And guys, they took three safeties, and they have two. They have Carl Joseph and Jonathan Abrams already.
They need safeties.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need safeties. And then Derek, I'm sorry, man, but I just don't get what the Packers are doing ever in any draft of all time. Like last year they take Jordan Love with the, maybe they look good if if Rodgers stinks, but he's Aaron Rodgers and he doesn't stink. So I don't know. And then this year, with everything that was going on swirling around them at the draft, they don't take a receiver for him until the third round. What is it? One offensive player in the last decade in the first round for them, and it was
The quarterback.
It was Jordan Love.
Yeah.
So, and listen, I love Amari Rodgers. I do. And
He's a good player.
I really think he's going to help them. But I just
small.
I don't know what the Packers are ever doing to really help Aaron Rodgers. So those would be my losers of the weekend.
Yeah, well, I don't want to keep beating the dead horse here, so I tried to figure out some different teams here. I looked up New Orleans. New Orleans didn't have a lot of picks, but man, Drew Brees retires. Michael Thomas can't stay healthy. Sanders is gone, and they drafted one offensive player.
Was
and
Ian Book?
That was in the 7th round. Well, okay, I apologize. 2. Ian Book and then a receiver in the 7th round. I mean, I know their offense is less to be worried about than their defense is, but man, it just seemed like a very boring draft for them, and they got to look out. Because who the heck, we've talked already. Who the heck knows what's going on in Atlanta? But Carolina is going to be better this year, especially bringing on Darnold, making the move. Mike had them as a winner, mentioned all the stuff going on with them, and McCaffrey, of course, being back. They're going to be better. Of course, the Buccaneers are a championship team. So who knows what could happen in New Orleans there. I thought they would have went all in maybe offensively to make sure that stays up to snuff. But, and yeah, the Green Bay Packers.
What are they doing, Derek?
Mike, I said to Joe, I think they call his bluff, and I think Aaron ends up staying, but it really wouldn't shock me. It would be the last straw, man. How do you have the best, arguably, the best, most talented player, offensive player in football,
MVPs,
and you just don't help him out? I don't know the number off the top of my head, but he does not throw to any first-round wide receivers for touchdowns. I think it might be on one hand how many he's thrown in his entire career out of all those touchdowns.
Where was Adams picked?
Adams was a 2nd-round pick. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But
still,
but it's so frustrating, especially when I saw, and for some reason now the Ole Miss guy's name is blanking out of my head. The wide receiver,
Elijah Moore.
Elijah Moore was sitting there for them to take, and this is a family show, but that was a giant blank you to Aaron, especially just that same day he came out saying that stuff.
Elijah Moore is right there.
Let's grab a cornerback. I'm sure he'll stay. That stuff just annoys me. And then 2nd round, taking the center, who yes, Corey Linsley is now gone. He left, so that was a need. But man, yes, I do love Rodgers, but will he be the only Rodgers on the team to start the season? I'm not so sure.
Maybe they get somebody in free agency, Derek. Maybe they do it in free agency.
I mean, there's not much available right now in free agency.
No, or trade.
Come and gone. I mean, this is, when you have a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, that quarterback can develop receivers much faster. So the draft is a place to do it. Like, Amari Rodgers will be fine. He will be fine. He's a really good route runner. He's quick. Poses a lot of problems in the middle of the field for, deep down the seam because he's just so fast.
Yeah.
But like, you can take multiple receivers in a draft. You're allowed to do that, Green Bay. Like that is
You're allowed to do that.
Of course, I went to look at the rest of their draft, and I'm like, oh, they must have grabbed another one towards the end there. Nope. Offensive guard, defensive tackle, cornerback, offensive tackle.
They took Kylan Hill, the running back from Mississippi State, in the 7th. Like,
yes,
they could have traded up at 9 more picks before and took what's his name? Kadarius Toney. Could have traded to, but I mean,
that was
yeah.
It's a weird pick.
Yeah, I do love Rod. I think Rodgers could be a Randall Cobb type for Green Bay, and they've even said that he can line up in the backfield too.
Yeah,
which is something Randall Cobb used to do. I loved when Randall Cobb was on the team, but
they're
there
shocking.
It goes, and there goes the 2021 NFL Draft. We hope everyone enjoyed our little conversation here about the 2021 NFL Draft, and we will be doing a little bit more draft talk in coming weeks here. But of course, thank you, Mike, for coming on. We appreciate you as always.
No, thank you guys. The draft is like one of my favorite weekends of the year. So being able to talk about it after months and months of studying it and preparing for it, and then a weekend of being glued to the TV, I appreciate the opportunity to just talk about it.
As always, Joseph,
yes,
give us your final thoughts.
Well, this is a fun show. I always say that probably the NFL might be my weakest subject, as cousin Dan has pointed out to us on a couple occasions. But no, it's always good to talk about it. And the season's not that far. You think about it. I don't want to wish away the whole summer, but by August, we're going to be wanting to talk about fantasy football and preseason expectations. So a lot of these rookies are going to make big impacts on these teams. Next week's show, we have another guest on, and I'm looking forward to that just as much. But Mike, we're going to have you on for baseball, so don't get ready. We're talking some baseball sooner or later. I get that.
As always, everyone, don't forget to follow us on YouTube, and don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. That helps us out very much. And like the video to let us know that you're interested in what we're talking about. Don't forget to go out and follow us on Twitter. We're ramping up on Twitter, and of course, all podcast platforms, Facebook group. We're everywhere. We're everywhere, Joe. But thank you, everyone, as always, for taking time out of your day to spend some time with us. Stay safe and take care.